Hi, Sandy.
Oh, Paula.
I'm really excited about our conversation and just to see what might emerge, both
Mhm.
after all these years and of a wonderful friendship that goes back to when our children were very young and across a lot of distance and not living close to each other for a long time. So I know that you have been reading The Watch, and I'm really so interested in your thoughts and questions, and particularly in relation to the work that you are really deepening into as a doula for those who are dying.
Mhm. Well, it was um, the timing is interesting. Sacred timing is the way I think of it. That you and I reconnected, and that you were at this time um, ready to send the watch. Do whatever it takes to send the watch out into the world. And I'm honored that I had the chance to read it several times. And once I actually noticed that when each time I've gone through, I get more.
Mm.
There's real depth in your story. I sit and wonder at how you pieced it all together. So many layers, and I was noticing at the end, you were, yes, we are woven. Um, all earthly beings are participating in something real and large and intertwined. We are woven. And after all else falls away, we are left with the timeless grace of mystery. I feel like Paula and Sandy are somehow connected in the timeless grace of mystery here, but also the theme of weaving of all your stories, all the dimensions, um, all the people in your family, all your memories, all the aspects of who your father was, all the aspects of your striving to be present, to be witness, to be in the now each moment through your father's journey after his diagnosis. Um, there were themes within themes, and so that's why the multiple readings has given me more awareness of the artistry here, the mastery, and a testament to the levels of awareness that you had then and are continuing to grow as you reflect on the journey. It's not just a story of what happened then. Um, and as you say, you're continuing your mission, your heart's mission is to continue the journey in developing this relationship with your father. And the book is a testament to that. Um, there's so much more that you have gotten apparently after, and that you will be, I imagine, will be continuing to receive and to feel and to experience. And that's a lovely thing. You were mentioning my doula work. As an end of life doula, one of the things that we love to be involved with, that is a mission for many of us, is to help people recognize that the the now in the relationship, it be after a diagnosis, or when the realization has come that somebody's coming to the last chapter of their life, or perhaps even nearing the end of their life, and um, to grow that and to deepen that appreciation. It's an appreciation, even though it's a difficult time. So much can be appreciated within the challenges, within the sense of loss, impending loss. So much beauty is still there. So much love is still there to be had. So much peace, so much learning,
Mm.
and so many other people involved with supporting a person and a family and the close circle are there playing their role and being important, playing important roles. But the role of witnessing and expanding the level of awareness is available to the family, but many families haven't, and individuals involved haven't had the kind of experience you have through your training. And they're not even asking themselves the question of how can they expand their presence in the now. They're just reeling.
Right.
Reality. Yeah, so the doula plays that role of trying to expand and set into motion at least a little bit of awareness. And what you've done with your book and your reminiscences is provide, I think, a fabulous role model, if you will. You as the role model, your father as a role model, and the story as a role model that might inspire. I know I would say, I'm saying might, but I'm not really meaning might. I mean, will inspire. I know you will inspire many with the watch. So yeah, I'm going to read it again soon because literally each time I read it, I notice more and of this, because there's like a tapestry, when so many colors or textures are woven together, you can't take it all in with one look.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. I love that you begin with that line, "We are woven," and just how the sense that you experienced of the book as a weaving of so many different things. And I knew as I was starting that inevitably there was already, you know, just from the very most basic impulse to follow the experiences into writing, that there would be a weaving. And primarily that first impulse was in relationship to reflecting on how my different practices, how the ways that I could kind of become more aware of the degree to which I felt they made it possible for me to stay present, as I say, to stay present enough. And you know, at the outset of the actual going through it, really not being sure if I could. And then through the writing of it, and actually much more and more through the editing, was where I began to really see just how much was being woven and how I was feeling woven. And actually that was a very wonderful aspect, to discover that many of the parts of myself that for just such a long time I've kind of kept separate, or they've just been separate parts of my life. To some extent, actually my practice and my family, and but also these different parts of, like, the part of myself that just loves philosophy and kind of the intellectual, and then the part of myself that's just so longs for what we might call spiritual experience, and a great, I feel like, increasing openness to the mysteries, to the unknown, which for me, my meeting with Janet Adler back in the early 90s was the first time of really feeling a permission for that. I know it was always there since I was a young child, but and through the years, as I got older, just a lot of feeling of that, you know, that really isn't just the doubt. Is it real? And it's not valued, or it doesn't make sense. And, you know, where does it belong? Where do those feelings and yearnings belong in a day-to-day life. So it was Janet who really, the door opened, and her beckoning in was really the beginning of yeah, a kind of making space in me for this part of myself. And so I was really interested to see, just how important also that kind of more intellectual side, which is kind of the voice of the beginning, the first couple of chapters, and then to realize that the writing, which I wasn't so conscious of when I was writing it, but to realize that the writing, the process, and even the experiences that I went through in relation to my father, were taking me into and through these different parts of myself. The part that really had to open more to the emotional, which has always been a more challenging place for me. And then more and more towards the end of the book, the really opening more and more to direct experience and intuitive knowing. So yeah, so some of it was kind of some intentional leavings, and I feel like much of it was really that experience of being woven and realizing and recognizing and welcoming these different threads of who I am. And yeah, so I really love that you named this first.
When we commit to opening the window wider, we're not controlling. We have no control over what comes in.
Right.
Basically, you had said, may I wouldn't be able to find the exact spot right now as I look at my notes, but there was a point where you were making a commitment to be present enough to the experience and to your father and to each moment. And that alone opened the doors more widely.
Right.
But you didn't know what was going to come in. But de facto, there were going to be surprises.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we leave the world, when we leave the world of rational thought or the material world, we leave what's much more predictable to us. And we are much more open to surprise. That's not the word I really want, just to what comes, and to all much more that's available to us, which is not our regular daily experience. And that's why working with either within the birthing realm or within the end of life realm, while there are people who tend to shy away from the intensity or the mystery in these experiences, there is so much more available to us in those times when we are. You didn't want to welcome such an experience as your father's illness and impending death. Why would, no one would ever want that. But having given you that experience, in time, you were, as you write, you're seeing it more as the watch expresses the gifts. It describes the gifts in the loss, in the intensity, in the pain, in the confusion, in the struggles. And the intellectual side, I have to say that I went back and noticed how you brought in the Giordano Bruno reference. And I've tried to put myself in his place in that century with the taboos that existed then. And here was an expansive mind and an expansive spirit with some seeds of ideas that he then planted and grew more. And all that society could do was destroy him. They absolutely could not absorb the possibility that, that his mind and sensibilities had brought, had brought forward to consider.
Right. So threatening, it just so threatening to the status quo. To what?
And life does that. Death does that for us. It's so threatening to our status quo.
Mm. Yeah.
And we get to choose what we do. We choose what we do with that. You chose to open your heart and mind and ask for assistance from the great, from the spirits. And that society chose to end somebody's life, to silence him.
Yeah.
And this is a human quest for the freedom to open to something new.
Yeah. And give voice to it.
And then give voice to it and share it.
That huge risk. That huge risk.
What if Giordano Bruno's voice had been able to be heard or tolerated at least?
Right.
And so many people, I think, back to the watch, what if in reading and being exposed to the story of the watch, people could then become witness to either their own end of life or their family member's end of life in a brand new, open-hearted, wholehearted way. I think the watch is going to be able to provide to other people not only what might have been for those who are perhaps looking back at an experience, but what could be for those who are looking forward into an experience.
Yeah. Well, and just, yeah, what you're saying in relation to the what if and voice. Yeah, again, because we're talking about time, that Giordano's voice is in the world, thank goodness that he did speak and he did write, that he took that risk to really bring forth a very deep exploration that really spans, is just so full of life and death and what the very unimaginable, still, it is still all these years later, even though we can take in his voice and we have a whole different perspective on it, what he was talking about is still unimaginable to us. Our relationship to the cosmos and that the cosmos, the infinite nature that he experienced of the cosmos and his own being as part of that infinite nature.
And still there's one truth that has never been disproved, which is, and it's possible it could be disproved, I'm not trying to prove it, but as far as I know, it's never been disproved, that human beings are within our capacity, within our capacity of understanding and knowing the world, are the only species and entities that can entertain and in all these.
Yes.
Right? They are all available to us collectively and sometimes individually. And who would imagine that, say, preparing to journey with alongside someone at end of life, that these memories, the intellectual side, the spiritual side, the emotional side, the historical side, the celestial side, all these different aspects, if we can stay grounded enough to keep that kind of all the multiple kinds of awareness, that our experience of what is actually happening right in front of us expands into this place of wonder, really.
Yeah. Right, which may be the closest we really get to that kind of direct experience of the immensity, of the mystery, and yeah, a way that we actually are feeling the the scale of it. Wonder is just an extraordinary gift that we have
It is.
amidst all those capacities, those different ways of knowing and being that maybe help us to approach experiences that we might name as being of wonder.
Mhm. And I think I can remember somewhere in your book where you made this reference that wonder is related to wisdom.
Mm.
Where do I remember it? Somewhere where you were, I think it might have been Janet Adler, a Janet Adler reference, where she was making the point where that wisdom in the more mainstream definition is something more head related, but you
Mm.
got body.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
the whole of us is, what is our source of wisdom is the question, and that wonder is a big part of the foundation of wisdom. I don't even really know what I'm saying here, but I'm trying to say something that I'm having a hard time putting words into. But the wonder to me is very closely related to our source of wisdom. It's not knowing facts that creates wisdom. It's something way bigger and way deeper than that. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is something that can possibly guide a person or a society or a family or help us through an experience. And the source of that has got to be something in it helps when that source is woven of all these different potentials that we as human beings, with our hearts, our intuition, our spiritual connection, our bodies, our guts, as well as our brains. Our brains are like only one, like down the line. There's so many more parts of this. Our relationships. You make mention of that in the watch more than once, about the relational aspect of learning and the relational aspect of wisdom and of growing and of knowing.
Yeah. I feel like the phenomenon of relationship is kind of on every page. It is one of the central themes, if to say, of the watch, that just in whatever way in which we are growing. And when I say growing, in some ways, I mean becoming more and more of our own potential. It is because of relationship. It is, I mean, it's impossible to even imagine who we would be individually without relationship. Impossible. And I know for myself, so much of the kind of growth points or places of discovery and sense of kind of feeling the fullness of myself. And it can be through negative experiences and hard, difficult interactions or encounters, and then of course sometimes very positive ones. But though it is because of relationship that I discover and embody more of who I am and who gosh, you used the word mission way in the beginning of our conversation. And there's a little bit of that for me, that sense of a kind of, yeah, like, what is my purpose? And in a way that, we can recognize and feel like, yeah, this is right. This is where I need to be. I need to stay with this, even when it's hard, even when it's feeling kind of like hitting walls and fraud. But it's a kind of knowing that for me connects to what you're speaking about in relationship to all these different parts and a kind of wisdom where I think like there's more of us that are more aspects that kind of come into alignment into a way that we can stay awake and stay present to whatever it is that is happening.
And you raise a question. What makes a life worth living? Your comments raise that question in my mind. When we have, if we can touch that place or that area where these things are integrated and give us direction, not just for a moment or a few months, but for a lifetime, eventually get that place where we feel like this life has meaning. When we feel our life has meaning, has purpose, has direction, it can be just such a tremendous source of our groundedness, of our inner peace, happiness, and our power. It empowers us too. You were talking about potentiality. That's where our potentiality really takes off. It's an intentional focus of direction and purpose and focus that makes so much more possible than someone who is much more reactive, which happens a lot at end of life. People are so much more reactive, and happens when people are not grounded, happens when people are not feeling connected to their inner wisdom. And it happens more when people feel more alone and less in relationship. Back to that point too.
Right.
Because relationships are, as you use the words, are mirrors back to us, and that helps us see and know ourselves. Relationships ground us, they give us perspective, they give us so many different kinds of things, and they allow us to know they often can allow us to know ourselves better, and then bring us to that place of wisdom and purpose that can make our lives feel fulfilling. Your father had two mantras that they came up more than once. We're all on the same side. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And see if I can remember the other one. What was the other one? You might be able to say it before I can find it.
That's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty. Oh, that one I particularly love, because what does that really mean?
Right. What does that even mean?
But it's also beautiful. Even the messiness, messy parts, the painful parts, the chaotic parts, they still have their own beauty. That's what I couldn't even capture the words. That's the beauty of it. It's just a tiny little phrase, but it just says so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of it in that phrase, every time I sort of read it or typed it, I would hear his voice, because the intonation of how he said it was like, there was just so much kind of like just engagement and openness and like a kind of wonder. They're actually the phenomenon of wonder was in the way he said, that's the beauty of it. And it was a constant invitation to us, my brothers and I, to maybe shift our perspective. And there was a lot of resistance often to,
Sure.
because it's like we could see quite clearly that this is not a job anybody wants to do, or certainly I don't want to do it on a Saturday, when I could be playing with my friends or, whatever it was. But it really, it was something. And then it would be really interesting to hear him say it in relationship to colleagues or friends, like peer friends, that it wasn't just something he was saying as a kind of a, sleight of hand lesson to his children. It was something that just kind of came so naturally out of him in a way that really expressed his whole perspective around the potentiality of what people could do together, which I think he had a very expanded, that this was an aspect of him in which there was a kind of expansion of a sort of vision, a longing, a hope.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, is another angle on we're all on the same side, because if we're all on the same side, we have no fear
Right.
or barriers to relationships. Open ourselves. So why not open ourselves?
But it also is acknowledging the kind of, at least the way he meant it, was that there is room for each of us seeing things, perceiving differently, that we're both on the same side of looking at the same thing, but it's a circle. You know, each person is going to have their perspective from where their standpoint is, what's happened in their lives, everything that has brought them to this moment that makes them who they are, and their way of seeing the world. So that part also was just so expansive, a kind of very inclusive interest in hearing the different perspectives, while recognizing that they in no way divide us, separate us from whatever that sort of essential, that essential place of what it means to be a human being. Like that's the side he's speaking for, our humanity.
Yeah, and I was thinking of it, you even mentioned the Robert Frost poem, and there are no cows, and that part. When if somebody said to me out of the blue, we're all on the same side. The image I was just asking myself, what's the image I have? It's a wall or a fence or something like that. Like you said, there's a paradox there. But what your father was espousing in my mind, and it's so interesting that we're talking about a watch, a circle.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all on the inside of a circle, there are no straight lines in that, and we all are on the inside of this human experience. Then, and that brought me to, the watch, the 12 avenues in Paris, the 12 cousins, the face of the actual watch, the exchange of the watches, the watch working, the watch not working. There were so many different aspects and parallels to in the inclusivity and the relationship and the connections that I got from that. And then that's the beauty of it all. There are paradoxes, there's wonderment, there's nonsensical aspects. A swan like coming on the beach and just going along, everybody flying off. What do you make of that? What can you make of it? Well, you can make of it wonder and beauty.
Right.
And why not? It did happen. These things did happen. Do we know what they mean? Well, maybe we don't know what everything means. We can still be filled with wonder.
Yeah. Yeah. That too is such a starting place for me. I don't think it would never have occurred to me to have written something about my father being ill, just getting this diagnosis of esophageal cancer, his illness, and then his death. I would never have written about that without the watch. I mean, the watch, the actual physical object of my watch, which 3 months before my father died, he initiated the I don't even know what it was. It wasn't a request. It was just kind of this spontaneous thing that came up, where he suggested that we trade watches. And so he wore my watch for the last 3 months of his life, and I had his watch. And then I remember so vividly the moment of that exchange, the degree to which it felt like something that was happening outside of time, something that had a kind of ritual quality, the the taking off my watch and helping him take off his, then putting mine on his wrist and then putting his on mine. And then the way we just sort of sat back and continued just looking out at Long Island Sound and the clouds and the birds and all that. And something got set in motion. It sort of was a kind of follow. It was like kind of the next thing. You had mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that there was something I sort of made a commitment to, that question that I had, may I be present enough? But that question was sort of a degree of a commitment to stay with this process of whatever would unfold in relation to my father. And this was a whole other next thing. And that had to do not just with my process, but with my relationship with my father, with the whole process of what we were approaching. Then what happened after his life, when that watch, just a week later, it's back on my wrist, and the hands and numbers began falling off. And so that moment when I first saw, like, the 6 was gone, and I couldn't tell, what am I even looking at? What am I looking at? Talk about nonsensical. It made no sense at all. But with all that heightened feeling in relationship to the watch as this object, that I'd had this whole exchange and feel almost a sense of a pact with my father, it just became this very heightened experience of a kind of wonder that was also like a huge question, like something like a whole next chapter. Oh, what is this? This is something asking. This is asking me. The watch is asking me to look at this, to pay attention to this. And where is this going to take you? Where is this going to take you? And I couldn't answer that question without the writing. The writing was the way that I responded to what the watch was asking.
There's there's an idea out there that we are being issued invitations every day, each of us, that ideas come floating along like in the breeze, within our reach. Say we're in a field of wheat and something is floating by, and we have the choice at any one time to notice and or to reach up and take hold of that idea, creative idea. And you noticed and took hold that creative idea. And part of the thought is the idea is looking for you. We don't all take hold of the ideas that are looking for us. But if we don't, they move on, and maybe no one else, maybe it's not meant for anybody else, and maybe no one else will ever take it up. Giordano Bruno reached for his idea. But he might not have. And sometimes it can take a long time for somebody to reach for a similar idea. And sometimes it's just meant for that person and it disappears. I love this. I love the way you describe that, because it made me think you noticed and stood up and said, yes, I accept this mission. I accept, and I see and accept. And it's a big, I've never asked you how long it took you to put all this together, but I know it wasn't a short time. A lot of effort and time went into it. But now you have this beautiful thing to share. And I can notice that I'm focusing on the sharing part today. I keep talking about how many people you'll inspire, but I think that it's true. You've added to your life, the richness of your life through it, and your whole family life. And this is something that can be shared. And this is the ripple effect that we're going to see. I'm very excited for that part. I don't know how you're going to do it or when you're going to do it, but I do hope you step up to that in the beautiful way you stepped up to putting it together.
Yeah, it is a whole different stepping up. Yeah, which may I be present enough. Yeah. Oh, that indeed, this one of the there's a whole sequence of editings and coming back and going through again, and I knew that this is not for me. It required me, but it was not for me. And of course, the first audience that I imagined were my children. And now that I have a few grandchildren, I can very much imagine sharing this at some point with my grandchildren, or it being shared with my grandchildren. And yeah, so the family was an immediate audience. And but I did have a feeling that it is a sharing that extends beyond me and my family, just because it is such it is so universal. This is the invitation that we all face the possibility that will we step towards it, will we open ourselves to this invitation into a more intimate relationship with what it means to live and to die, what it means to be born and come into a life. And that at some point, often when we're quite young, we begin to have the awareness or the sense that this is not forever, this form, at least in this form, that we will die. And that there's just so much unknown around this, of what does that mean? What would that be like? What happens afterwards? Is there an afterwards? It's just every single person. This is something that it affects. So in part of my longing, and it was very clear as I came to the end of my story, that my story was really to invite other people's stories and my own longing to have these kind of conversations and to hear some of what other people have experienced, or what their questions are, or what feels challenging, or what feels like it was like an experience of grace in the midst of so much that can be very difficult.
Our society is not attuned to intimacy. We were talking about relationships before. Intimacy implies close relationships of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And our souls crave intimacy, that kind of connection that feeds the soul. So, and opportunities are everywhere, but we're not taught. It's hard to find ways to delve into growing our awareness into intimacy even with ourselves.
Especially, I think it has to begin to some extent with intimacy with ourselves. And that is one of the places where you need someone to be in relationship, I believe. At least this is what I discovered with my work with Janet, that outside witness kind of giving permission for that inward turn.
Yeah, and where do we find that? You had Janet Adler, but the average person, where do they turn?
Yeah.
On the path of life, there are just so few options, unless you're fortunate to have a father like Bob or a mentor like Janet to bring you closer. Most people don't have,
Right.
don't understand even that something. And if you don't even understand the potential. And if you don't know to ask the question, or you don't know to look, you won't find. You need someone to say, you can ask that question, or you could take a new look this way at your
Right.
inner life.
Right.
Most
And
people don't even.
there's so many places where that hold the potential for those kind of relationships. I really, that's for me, I've looked toward education, the field of education and what it means to be a teacher, and just the potentiality of what can be exchanged, what can be learned in the relationship of a student and a teacher. The same thing in the medical field, the doctor and patient, and in families, how can we as elders be in a kind of a more, like, bring even just a little bit of a sort of witness presence, be able to step back and kind of own our own experience enough that we give space for our kids to do whatever they need to do and make mistakes and find their way and have great discoveries of their own experience of being a parent.
Doesn't actually have to be other people. Nature.
Sure, absolutely. That's why I felt really important to bring nature into the watch.
Nature, writing, music, the arts. Yeah. And these things are becoming more and more rare or depleted in our society. So a lot of the work that we do, you do, I do, and others do, is to refresh and rejuvenate and grow, make sure, to plant the seeds for new.
Right, because there's so much fear of intimacy. There's so much fear. I mean, there's so much sense of like, oh, well, we have to keep these, of course, boundaries are incredibly important, but even maybe really good boundaries support the potential of intimate relationship. And
I think it's more than maybe.
yes, they do. We know they do.
Yeah.
We know they do. Yeah.
I read the cover of a book I have here, and Oprah says, oh, this book has changed my life. And I feel like that about this book. I will not forget reading this book. I read so much. I do forget books. Did I read that book? I don't know. I will not forget this. And I will not forget the many, many nuggets that I got from it.